So I talk about a lot of stuff concerning Germany and other parts of the world on this channel. I bring up the prison systems because I feel it's my duty as a well-known YouTuber to try and... What? What do you mean I'm not a well-known YouTuber? Okay, I'm speaking it into existence so I can hopefully get to 10,000 subscribers. I'll never make it. Okay. I quit. What's going on, everybody? Christopher here, back with another video. Thank you for watching this content. Welcome to all the new members of the CLR Nation. The only thing that I ask and appreciate from you guys is that you like the videos. So having thrown out a couple videos about the prison systems across the world, I pretty much gave Germany huge accolades for having a good prison system that works. I found a couple other prison systems that actually are comparable to it, or even probably surpass it in a couple ways. But then people started telling me to check out Swedish prisons, amongst other prisons. So I'm gonna check out this Swedish prison. It's being compared to the US in this particular video, but I still wanna try and compare it to what I saw in the Germany prison videos. This is a Swedish prison versus American prison, but we're gonna still compare it to German prisons.
The United States has about 5% of the world's population, yet has a quarter of all the world's prisoners, with roughly 1 in every 107 American adults behind bars. With the crackdown on the war on drugs leading to harsh prison sentences, as well as no-tolerance policing, the American public has to ask itself if punishment is really working as intended.
And that's some of the things that we talked about in the other videos. I think we all can agree that the US is kind of doing prison wrong. Most of us can agree that the US kind of uses punishment and revenge and making sure people are constantly reminded that they made a mistake all throughout their sentences. And it equals really negative-minded people once they're out again. They become less about rehabilitation, as it seems. Let's keep going.
Inflation has been growing exponentially since after the Second World War. Yet it wasn't until the crack epidemic of the 1980s and the ensuing war on drugs that the US prison population really boomed. Federal and state legislation was quickly passed which dictated mandatory minimum sentences for any drug-related crime, all in a bid to make crime so unattractive that the harsh punishments would deter would-be criminals.
But we still have to keep in mind there's underlining stuff. You understand what I'm saying? The crack came from somewhere. It wasn't invented by the people that were being arrested for it and thrown in jail for using it and selling it. They didn't invent it. Do your research.
Prison very quickly became known as Crime University because inexperienced first-time offenders would be sentenced to years and leave better able to commit the crimes they were originally sentenced for, mentored for years by the more experienced inmates. To make matters worse, American prisons have historically offered few opportunities for rehabilitation or ways for inmates to better themselves and lay the foundation for a different type of life once back on the outside. The individuals who commit these crimes will one day be rejoining society. And thus, prison represents less a tool for punishment and more a chance to reform an individual while removed from the general population.
That's important. And it's one of the things that has been completely left out of the American justice system. It's crazy, absolutely bananas how much this would make a difference. I said before that I know there's more people that they would need to treat, more people that they would need to run through this system. And I know the US is not even ready to begin to implement this now. There would have to be steps taken where they could possibly, imaginably try and get to this stage of the system. It's just so messed up right now that I don't even think this could happen quickly. I mean, a few decades at minimum. That's at minimum with some hardcore dedication, in my personal opinion.
Treating prisoners humanely is one of the first steps toward rehabilitation for the Swedish. In the US, many prisons run over capacity, and overall, the US is 103.9% over capacity. This leads to at times as many as 4 prisoners sharing a cell. And with many prison systems across the American states running over budget, the problem only gets worse as parts of prisons or even entire prisons are closed in a bid to save money. Even more rare are prison riots in Sweden. Perhaps that's because by comparison, the Swedes focus on housing prisoners in what they consider humane conditions.
And that's one of the things. Even if you had to pack more than one inmate in a cell, if they had conditions to keep their minds at least occupied and at ease, then I don't think there would be as much hostility. In most prisons in the US, from what I know, they only get like an hour, maybe a couple hours to themselves. They're just always restricted to these cells that are so dark and dim, and they have nothing to occupy their minds but interactions with the other person. And what do we see? 9 times out of 10, it ends up being competition in other ways, in negative ways, not so pleasant ways. When it could be, as you see on the screen here, football.
The fact that the Swedish prison population has dropped from 5,722 prisoners to 4,500 over the last 10 years has helped not just with crowding issues, but with budget issues as wings of prisons or even entire prisons are closed down for a lack of need. There's also a general difference in the attitude of what prison is between the US and Sweden. With the US and its harsh sentencing guidelines, especially mandatory minimums for drug offenses, leading to a prison as a first resort mentality. In Sweden, prison is seen as a last resort.
That's a good point. In the States, you're not given a chance to have made a mistake in your life. They give you the minimum sentencing, even if you probably just made a mistake. Even if you're not necessarily a criminal. Everybody makes mistakes. So they give them this time in jail as people who may not have even been criminal minded. But once they get in there and get exposed to all the harsh conditions and negativity and violence and having to defend themselves, that kind of creates the criminal. It kind of accentuates the kind of criminal mentality that they didn't even have going in. Maybe everybody doesn't need a harsh sentence. Maybe people just made a mistake.
Per the Swedish mentality, some people must be incarcerated. But even if they are, then it should be the goal of the state to release them back out into society in a better shape than they were when they first entered.
Absolutely.
Compare that to the US, which is firmly entrenched in a punishment mentality, with prisons slashing work release, education, and job skills programs. Some prisons have even forbidden inmates from being sent books by those on the outside. Crime is not just an act in Sweden, but a consequence of an underlying social or psychological problem.
That's very important. I like that. And it goes right along with what I just said. Not everybody has a criminal mentality. Some people just have shortcomings. Some people just feel like they need to do something out of desperation. I think 90% of the time when you talk to an inmate or somebody who's been locked up for their first offense, they really didn't want to do that thing. So a little bit of rehabilitation, a little bit of psychological help could go a long way rather than just throwing them off into a cell for years.
And the prison system sees it as its responsibility to address these problems if it can. When you're considering the fact that these individuals will one day be released back into society as a whole, as the Swedish consider, then it makes perfect sense that prison shouldn't be about punishment, but about rehabilitation and treatment. To this end, Swedish prison guards fulfill both security roles and rehabilitative roles, and each prisoner has a contact officer who monitors the inmate's progress toward their eventual return to society. This helps prisoners see guards not just as, well, guards, but also as individuals who are trying to help prisoners live better lives once back on the outside.
Imagine the progress that would be made if prisoners in the States had something like this. That's just wonderful. Okay, so this compared to Germany though. They didn't go into details like this much about the Germany prisons in those videos, but I can already see some differences and some things that I feel are better than the German prisons. The only thing is I can't say that the German prisons don't have them because they just didn't talk about it. But these right here, I like these. If you throw these into the German prisons, I think the German prisons will probably be right on par with these. Now, I don't know if this guy mentions which, how they rank amongst prisons in his video, but so far this Swedish prison is just as good, and maybe slightly even better than the Norwegian prison.
But for the majority of American prisons, inmates are seen as tenants and little more. Prison guards fulfill one and only one duty in the US, and that's to keep inmates in line and punish offenders. Rather than build a protectorate relationship with inmates, prison guards in the US are built solely as tools of punishment by a penal system that cares little for the individual. This is likely why incidents of violence against prison guards is so high in the US.
Okay, I already know how America works. I know money controls everything. But there has to be somebody in there that's looking at this like, okay, we're not the only ones that see this. There has to be other people that are watching and sees what's happening. I would be looking at this like, okay, wouldn't I want to have a prison that's improving people? Less violence, less assaults, less people rotating in and out, as in getting out and coming back in. I would want to be that prison that actually rehabilitates people. Set the tone, like start the trend, be the example. That's what I would want. How come nobody wants this? That's crazy.
The focus is once more on humane treatment and correcting bad behavior, as well as building a prisoner's chances for a successful life outside of prison. That might sound naive to American prison officials, and yet the numbers don't lie. Sweden not only has a
Look at you'll be back soon. That is crazy to have that kind of mindset. Golly, I just feel like that's the most depressing thing ever. That they have that mindset that everybody is just stuck there mentally. That's depressing.
Yet the numbers don't lie. Sweden not only has a shrinking prison population while the US's is growing, but its recidivism rate is at 29% after 3 years. The US, meanwhile, has a recidivism rate of 60%.
Jeez, oh my gosh. 29% versus 67%. What was Germany's? I don't even remember at the moment. 29% versus 67% is bananas.
Rate of 67.8% after 3 years. Clearly, a focus on treating prisoners humanely and treating psychological and other issues while building life skills is working to make Sweden a safer place, and are things that the United States could learn from.
Can you believe how good Germany prisons are, Norwegian prisons are, and Swedish prisons are? Like, it's easy to be like, I don't have to care about prison at all. I'm never going there. It's easy to be like that. But when you look at this as something that affects the society as a whole, you can't help but dig into this. And that's where I feel like some things are just intentional in the States. Because they're not blind. People can't not be seeing what's going on. You know the prison system is effed up. You know there's people going in and out of jail. You know there's people being killed in jail, assaulted in jail, raped in jail. You know this. Why wouldn't anybody want to do something about this? And you know they know prisons around the world are different. And I'm not just talking about stateside prison. Whatever prison around the world that uses making money as a tool to keep people down, to keep people oppressed, to keep people locked up, mentally effed up, screwing up societies, all of that. Shame. Shame on any society that has a prison that operates in that fashion. Shame.